Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for Point of View. I'm so glad you're with us and happy to be back in this chair today because I've got two great folks co-hosting with me during this hour today. First of all, as often on Fridays, we have Lathan Watts, and he is Director of Legal Communications for First Liberty Institute. Lathan, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me again.
And also, we have the treat of having State Representative Jeff Leach in studio. And Jeff is an attorney, and he is also kind of from my community. I mean, I know Jeff's parents, which dates me. And so it's great to have you here, Jeff, because I watched you when you first ran for office. And, of course, you're a practicing attorney now, but you give our state of your time by serving in the legislature. And it's been, 4 terms now?
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
It's always good to see you, and it's great to be here on the show.
Well, it's good to have you. And, there's just a couple things I want to hit right off the bat. A little bit later in the program, we are going to talk about this study. Nick Pitts covered it at length with the Millennial Roundtable this week. But it's a study, the Wall Street Journal and NBC did a poll, and it ended up showing that millennials and Gen Z folks place less importance on religion, patriotism, and having children than previous generations. It's by a margin that's a bit disturbing. And so we will unpack that today in the program because the Millennial Roundtable did a great job on it. But there's so much to say that we're going to continue and get your calls, of course. But Lathan, I want to ask you about the vice president and his remarks at a convention of the American Legion, because really it speaks to the repercussions or the great results of the Bladensburg Memorial Supreme Court decision, doesn't it?
It does. I was up in Indianapolis for the 100th American Legion convention, and we were up there celebrating with them the victory in the case of the American Legion versus the American Humanist Association, which is the official title of the Bladensburg case. And Vice President Pence addressed the conference, I believe, on the last day of the conference, and talked not only about that win, but went on to talk about another case of ours that's active right now in New Hampshire, where we represent the Northeast POW MIA network, and one of their members, a guy named Herc Streetberger, who was a POW in a German prison war camp in World War II, he donated his family Bible to the Northeast POW MIA network to include on a remembrance table at the VA hospital there. And if you're not familiar with POW MIA tables, every item on the table is symbolic of something. And the entire display is intended to remind people of the sacrifices that MIAs and POWs have given. And the Bible on a display table, or sometimes they call them remembrance tables, the Bible is intended to symbolize the strength gained through faith by the POW and his family back at home waiting for him or her. So Herc donated his family Bible, and they included it on the remembrance table. And the usual suspects at Military Religious Freedom Foundation, Orwellian-named organization, did not like the Bible present on the table at a VA display, and complained about it, threatened to file a lawsuit, and then one of their supporters actually did file a lawsuit. At the time when they talked about it, we put out a statement saying, "Hey, if anybody thinks they're going to remove this Bible, they're going to have to come through us." And the lawsuit was filed. We've now filed a motion to intervene in that lawsuit on behalf of our client, the POW MIA network up there in New Hampshire, to defend that display. We've already seen some good results out of the issue, in that previously the VA's policy was it was sort of left to the discretion of the individual facility directors on how to deal with this. The VA had guidance on this sort of thing, that this is a private display, it's owned by the POW MIA network, and therefore it's their speech, it's their content, and they should have control over it. But we asked the VA, look, you really need to create a policy for all facilities across America. Otherwise,
Makes
folks
sense.
like this are just going to go facility to facility until they find somebody they can intimidate into removing one of these and try to establish some sort of precedent that way. And the VA did. Secretary Wilkie issued new policy protecting these types of displays in every VA facility all over the country. So there's already a good result of this, but the lawsuit is moving forward. So we're intervening to defend that display and looking forward to a win in court that will just further strengthen the precedent of or establishing the principle that these displays belong to the POW/MIA networks, and the VA is perfectly within its rights to allow them to put one of these up in a VA facility. So the vice president was nice enough to mention that.
I loved it.
In his comments to the American Legion. And
he says the Bible stays.
Yes, he said our message is very clear. The Bible stays.
I love it.
So,
I love it.
So we were very happy to hear him do that, and then he tweeted about it, and then the president retweeted. So always nice when you show up in a positive way in one of the president's tweets. We'll take that. So,
yeah,
that's good.
Okay. Well, all right, that's good news, and we will talk about that a little bit more. I also want to mention that I did post some of the vice president's comments at pointofview.net, and also some comments of the VA secretary. And so you can check that out. We'll talk about it later. But Jeff Leach, just before the break, let's just, I want to get your sort of heart reaction to this particular legislative session that you just finished, because it was, you had a different leader in the State House. And so it was a little different.
Yeah, we did. And again, it's great to be here with you, and your listeners always love coming on, talking about these issues. And look, Texas, there's no question. Texas is unique among the 50 states right now. We're doing very well in terms of our economy is robust and growing. We made investments in education with systemic reforms and how we educate, raise up the next generation of Texas leaders. We've done a number of things to continue to be on the front lines in the fight for life and religious liberty and traditional Texas values. I think we have a lot we can be proud of. That said, we didn't get everything done we needed. That's typical in a legislative session. You go after so much and you fight for so much and you push and you push and you at the end of the day you're able to celebrate some victories, and then you look back and you say, man, I wish we were able to do this or that. And so that spurs us on to look forward to next session as we go into re-election season, to talk about the issues that really matter, not only for the Texans of today, Penna, but for the future Texans of tomorrow, making sure that Texas remains strong and that we're leading the rest of the country. Look, people are literally picking up their homes, their families, their businesses, their lives, and leaving other states to come to Texas. They're leaving California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey. They're leaving these states, and they're saying to their family, to their kids, to their spouses, to their bosses, to their employees, we're going to Texas. And there's a reason for that. And it's our job as policymakers, as advocates for the people that we represent, to continue to preserve the Texas miracle.
Well, that is going to be my next question after the break, and that is, what about all the folks that are coming from other states, California? Are we at risk of having them change Texas? Is Texas at risk of becoming, rather than red, being purple? We will talk about it right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Executives at Google may claim that they are not biased against conservatives, but information from engineers who work for Google tell a different story. One of those engineers is Greg Coppola. He went public last month in an interview with Project Veritas, and after that interview, he was put on administrative leave. He explains that the algorithms used by Google don't write themselves. Software programmers write them to do what they want them to do. That makes sense to me. I wrote computer programs years ago and don't claim to have the expertise of those writing programs at Google, but it does seem like even machine language and machine learning can be easily manipulated to give biased results. Another Google engineer that has come forward is Zachary Voorhees. He also leaked documents from Google to Project Veritas. One of those documents provided evidence of what he called algorithmic unfairness. Once Google figured out that he was the person who leaked the documents, they took two actions. First, they demanded the material be returned. Then they sent law enforcement officials to his home to perform a wellness check. This was a blatant attempt at intimidating him. The one document he leaked that got my attention was the news blacklist used by Google. Lots of organizations and websites that we use to get information and educate our listeners was on the list. Christian Post, Daily Caller, Life News, American Thinker are just a few of a long list of sites on the Google blacklist. Another leaked document from Google ranked news sources in order of their credibility. ABC, CBS, PBS, CNN, and MSNBC were all ranked higher than Fox News. The investigative report by Project Veritas and the publication of these Google documents from insiders illustrate that there is indeed a bias in the way that this company aggregates and displays data. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Affirm Films and the Kendrick Brothers, Overcomer, starring Alex Kendrick and Priscilla Shire, rated PG, now playing in theaters. Overcomermovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. In studio with me, Lathan Watts from First Liberty Institute, and also Jeff Leach. And Jeff represents, he's state representative. He represents parts of Plano, Allen, Richardson, and Dallas, all in Collin County. He's not my state representative, but I'm not far away. And I've watched his career. And Jeff, what was it that motivated you to run in the first place?
Wow. We have, it's a really interesting question, and I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. At the end of the day, Penna, the Lord just called Becky and I to this. It wasn't just a decision I made. It was with the support of Becky and our family and trusted counsel and advisors and pastors, our closest friends. And we had been in politics for a long time, like I imagine a lot of your listeners are, giving, voting, working at polling locations, block walking, of course, being prayer warriors. It's important for Christians to recognize we have a role in a civil society. And I believe that role is more than just going to the ballot box and voting. And for some people, God calls us off the sidelines and into the arena to run for public office. And I've felt that stir in my heart, that pull on my life since I was even a little boy. And in 2011, when this spot became open, the Lord just kind of put it on our heart and stirred our hearts to pray about it. And we did, and He gave us this opening, and we ran. And we were fortunate to win. And we've been on the front lines in the fight for liberty and freedom ever since.
Well, you have. And, before the break, I kind of teased that we would talk about Texas. And, we are, it's an important state. I mean, we have to remain conservative, I think, for the good of the country. Are we at risk of moving to the purple column from the red column?
Yes. Yes, we are. And I don't think it's worth our time or the time of politicians and pundits to be talking about what's the cause of that, whether it's people moving in or changing demographics or voting trends, what's happening in Washington or Austin. I think we've got to realize, if we look at recent elections, that we have turned from a bright, bold red state into a purple state. There's no denying that. Even here in Collin County, where I live, which used to be one of the strongest Republican strongholds in the country. I do believe that with every challenge comes a great opportunity, though. I think that last November, with as close as some of the races were, from Senator Cruz's race, Governor Abbott's race was closer than we expected. Congressmen and state representatives up and down the ballot were closer than a lot of us expected. That's a wake-up call for us, for believers, for like-minded, liberty-minded voters, Texans, Americans, to say, you know what? I'm not comfortable with this. I don't like the way things are going. I'm happy with some things, but I'm fearful about others, and so I'm gonna encourage my family, my friends, people around me to go vote, to get involved. And I think we're seeing that. I'm real encouraged as we look forward that people have gotten the wake-up call, we've heard the alarm, and we're being mobilized and moved to action. And I'm seeing that not only here in Texas, not only in North Texas, but all across the country. And I'm excited and encouraged about it.
I asked you about the session, and you sort of had mixed reaction to the results. And one of the real successes, though, I think was a bill that you actually introduced. And it's something, it's like, to me, to a pro-lifer, it's such a no-brainer. And it's kind of a surprise we didn't have one of these bills before, but tell us about your real, I don't even know the title of the bill. It's a Born Alive bill, though, and these are no-brainers.
Well, they should be no-brainers, and it's the Texas Born Alive Infant Protection Act, House Bill 16, which I authored and passed this session. The fact that we're even having this conversation in this country, and here's the conversation, here's the question. What should you do? What is the right thing to do when a baby survives an abortion attempt? When a baby is living, breathing, crying, reaching out for help, its heart is beating, it's moving outside of the womb. The fact that we're even, as a result of what's happening in Washington or Virginia or New York, having a discussion about what to do in that situation is beyond comprehension. Where Washington has failed to act, the Democrats in Washington, make no mistake, have refused to even vote on this issue. The governors in New York and Virginia and in other states across the country have said, we're going to leave it up to the woman and her doctor to make that decision. In Texas, where others have failed to act, where others have failed to speak, we moved. And with this bill, we drew a line in the sand and put a stake in the ground and said there should be no discussion. We can have a discussion about the pro-life cause, and maybe reasonable people can disagree. I know where I stand on it. I know where we stand. But when a baby, this is essentially fourth trimester abortion. Mm-hmm. And the doctor and the woman, the people in that room owe that baby the full protection of medical care to save that baby's life. And that's what our bill ensures, and that's what it does.
Okay, there was one Born Alive bill passed on the federal level, but now there's not teeth in it.
That's right.
As far as what happens, if that actually happens. What about the Texas law?
Well, that's really well said, and that's a great point, because there's been some pushback. Well, this was already law. We don't need this. It's a solution in search of a problem, and that's actually not true. And in fact, that's what's happening in Washington right now. You've got some great conservative, courageous senators and representatives who are pushing a federal version of this to do much what we did in Texas, and that's to strengthen existing law. And existing law basically just states that baby has a right to life, but there's no teeth. There's no enforcement mechanisms. There's no increased standard of medical care. Our bill in Texas was very clear. It was very specific about what the standard of medical care is, what that physician, that doctor, it's an abortionist, what that abortionist must do. He must change from trying to kill the baby to trying to save the baby. And again, like that we're even having this conversation just breaks my heart and devastates my soul. But that doctor must get him that baby to a hospital, use any and all measures to save that baby's life, must go into life-saving mode. And it's very clear in our bill. And if he doesn't do so, there's very severe penalties for not doing so, not meeting that standard of care.
Well, that's a good thing. What about, are there any other bills protecting the sanctity of human life that you are really happy about that came out of the session?
We defunded Planned Parenthood again. We made it impossible for local governments, for political subdivisions of the state, whether it's counties or cities or school districts, to be sending taxpayer money to abortion clinics or their providers or affiliates. The city of Austin had essentially given Planned Parenthood a prime location right in the middle of the city, tax-free. That's unfathomable. They're basically getting the building for free. And so we made that to be impossible under Texas law going forward. That's authored by my good friend Candy Noble from Collin County, also a Prestonwood member.
She comes in here a lot.
Yeah, it's just a great bill. We increased funding. Another thing that I'm really, really excited about, and that I don't think gets enough talk from conservatives, is we are investing in women's health. We are this talking point from the left that the right is shutting down abortion clinics, shutting down Planned Parenthoods, and preventing women from being able to access necessary health services, breast and cervical cancer screenings, is complete it's complete false. I mean, it is not true. We have invested, I think this session, nearly $80 million into the Texas Healthy Women's Program over the past several sessions. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars into supporting providers all across the state who are offering these essential services to women who find themselves at that point of need. That's something that we need to talk more about, a positive step forward to meet these women at the point of their need, but to do so in a way that does not support abortion providers or the industry. It can be done.
It's going to be proven now that Planned Parenthood is separated from Title X money for this.
And it's Republicans who led the charge to do that in our budget this session. And it's something I think we can be really proud of.
Lathan, do you have any questions before the end of this segment?
Maybe shift from the pro-life agenda to tax relief and tax reform. And I'd like to hear kind of your assessment of the session when it comes to providing tax relief to property taxpayers in Texas.
Well, we had a great session. We were finally able to deliver on our promise to the voters. And I would say these are voters of all political stripes, all demographics, all income levels, all across the state who are crying out for real property tax relief, many of whom are facing the reality of being taxed out of their homes that they, in many cases, built with their own hands. I hear it in my own district. They can afford their mortgage. In many cases, the home is paid off. They're on fixed incomes. They cannot afford the year-to-year rate of growth of their property taxes, and they're having to move. That's unfathomable. Government should not be in the business of taxing people out of their homes. So late in this session, we were able to pass legislation that caps, it's more of a trigger bill, a limit on the year-to-year rate of growth that cities and counties and school districts can raise your property taxes. For instance, your property taxes right now, your school district property tax is the vast majority of your tax growth from year to year. We put a hard 2.5% cap on that. And with respect to your city and county taxes, if the city comes to you and says, hey, we need to hire more fire or police or build a new fire station or repair roads, build pipelines, and we need more money to do so, all they have to do is go to the voters and ask for permission to raise your taxes. That's all they have to do. And under this law, they have to do that going forward. It's an automatic election if they want to raise those taxes more than 3.5%. I believe that Texans are going to see this property tax relief, and they deserve it. It's something we've been working for a long time.
You've got your work cut out for you in the next session, Jeff. It's going to be fun to see what's up then. Yeah. Our legislature just meets every other year, so that's great.
Yeah. A cornerstone of the republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of view can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
Lathan and I have a few more minutes with Jeff Leach, State Representative representing parts of Collin County. We're so glad you're here, Jeff, and I appreciate you staying a few more minutes because I wanted to ask you about this survey. It's the Wall Street Journal NBC survey, and it's been it was a big topic this week on Point of View. We want to continue it today. But it basically says patriotism, religion, and having children rate lower among younger generations, millennials and Gen Z, than they did 2 decades ago when they did this same survey. And, you know, especially the idea of having children was not as important to these 2 generations. And I just wonder if you've got a take on why this might be.
Well, I haven't seen the study yet. I know we've talked about it here as we've been off the air, and it's fascinating. I look forward to reading it. I will tell you that I am very concerned as I see this next generation of Americans being raised with no foundational understanding of what this country, the principles upon which this country was founded. Scripture is very clear that we should train up a child in the way he or she should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. I know when I was raised, when I was growing up, my parents instilled in me, of course, the precepts of Scripture, but also the duties of being a Christian member of society. And we watched the news. Yes, I would listen to presidents speak and listen in social studies, but it was more so my parents instilling in me those values around the dinner table and in the living room and in our conversations, going to 4th of July parades, talking about those principles which have made America great. And I'm not sure that's happening as much anymore today. I'm concerned that we're not teaching the fundamental principles of the Constitution to our kids in 4th grade and 5th grade, 8th grade, seniors in high school, maybe a little bit of the history of World War II and the Civil War, but we don't get to 9/11. We don't talk about current day politics in our normal social studies classes. I'm concerned about that. I've seen it. It's our responsibility as Christians. We can't count on or depend on or wait for someone else to do this for us. It's our responsibility in our own homes, in our churches, in our communities to really raise up and train up and educate this next generation of Americans. That's I know what we're committed to doing in our own home, and I hope that others will be doing the same.
Yeah, so it's funny because people in your generation that I've heard talk about this have said the exact same thing, not as eloquently as you, but that it's the home that's very responsive. Don't count on the other institutions of society to inculcate patriotism into the next generation. Yes, they should, but you as parents are ultimately bottom line responsible.
That's right. And not only, that's really well said, but not only patriotism, because it's one thing to say, I love America. I'm proud to be an American. It's one thing to say that I'm going to stand up when I salute the flag, when the pledge or the national anthem, which is great. But that, to me, that's the bare minimum. We have a duty to do much more than that as Christian citizens, to vote, to talk to our neighbors and our friends about current day issues, what we believe as Christians about these fundamental issues. And even when we disagree, doing so in a loving way, but very forcefully and passionately defending our values. Look, we're at a fork in the road. The 2020 election, I believe, and I feel like we say this every year, is going to be the most important election of our lifetime in a generation. We have an opportunity right now to take America, to save America. America's great, but we have an opportunity to save America and to teach our kids that it takes all of us coming together, doing so together. And, man, if we win in 2020 and we do so in the right way and we're able to get a couple more justices on the Supreme Court and we can protect America, safeguard it for future generations, our kids and their kids. That's what I want to do. I want them to have the same freedoms and opportunities I had growing up here.
Just creating the atmosphere for families then to do their jobs.
That's right.
And so many times there are things that actually are roadblocks for families. Well, let me just ask you very quick because I know you have to go. What about the idea that millennials are not that, they're way less interested in having children? And they say that, they voice that. Or do you think many of them will change their mind and just have them later in life or never?
I don't know if I have enough information to opine. I don't even know if I'm a millennial. Are we millennials?
I think you are on the.
So I'm like right on the edge.
You could be defined either
All
way.
I know is, I had 3 kids at the age of 31 or 32, and I had people tell me, "Wow, 3 kids! You're really young to be having kids." I've got friends now that are just having kids, and they're 37, 38. I don't know. I'm not a
better late than
statistician.
never. I say.
No,
Yeah. But think about what millennials, if you define, and I think the survey talks about them as like folks born from millennials and Gen Z from like the year 2000 to up to today. Think about what they've heard their whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for at least the last 20 years, they've been told that the Earth is going away in the next 10 years. Right? Would you be anxious to bring kids into a world you've been told that we're destroying the planet and we got 10 years to spend $20 trillion to keep cows from farting, or the whole world
You
is
really
going
think
to
that keeps
is going to
people from
die?
having kids?
I think there's a lot of factors, but I think that's part of it. I think most of the reaction to this poll has been the typical, "Oh, these kids today." Well, who raised them? I mean, it's like Jeff said. Have you taught your kids what patriotism is? Because if they follow the way the media talks about patriotism, the media talks about patriotism as nationalism, and nationalism is white nationalism, and white nationalism is racism. So if you're a patriot, you're somehow racist. Would you then, if you've been told that for the last 4 years on a constant drumbeat of the 24-hour news cycle, would you then tell a pollster that you value patriotism? If these kids who have born post 2000, when it comes to religion, they have grown up in the shadow of maybe the biggest scandal in the history of organized religion, which is the pedophilia in the priesthood and the cover-up by the church. And now it seems like virtually every week, the latest skinny jeans wearing pastor leaves the faith because tolerance or something. If that's your only exposure to religion, would you be quick to adopt that? And having kids, like I said, you've been told the world's coming to an end. Well, why would I bring kids into this world? Mm-hmm. It's like you talked about history. If all you know of American history is slavery and Jim Crow, would you be proud of your country? I mean, I guarantee you they're not being taught this in school.
Yeah, okay.
And they will sure not be taught it at a college campus. And so if you have this generation of people in your life, we do have a responsibility to talk to them about these things. And say, look, no, that's not what patriotism is. I mean, my favorite definition of patriotism is Mark Twain's. Support your country all the time and your government when it deserves it. Like that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's
hey, listen,
patriotism.
we're going to have a lot of fun talking about this later in the program. I wanted to say thank you so much, Jeff Leach, for coming in and talking with us today, and for your service to the state of Texas.
Thank you. Texas is a great place, and America is too. And it's the church, it's men and women of faith, and people who really love this country, no matter what your faith is, right? I mean, because there's a lot of people of different faiths that love this country, sacrifice, serve on the front lines, protecting our freedoms. And I think if we're able to come together and teach this next generation of Americans, I haven't given up on millennials. I haven't. Like on the pro-life issue, the polling suggests that millennials today are more pro-life than their parents. So we have openings, we have opportunities. Our institutions of higher education, our schools today need work, but that work, that impact, that positive impact is going to come from Christians who are engaging in society. And so I'm hopeful, I'm excited, and I'm confident that the best days for our country and for our state are still ahead of us.
Well, with leaders like Jeff Leach, I'd say that's a good
thank you.
possibility.
You're very kind.
Thank you.
God
for
bless
being
you and your
with us.
listeners.
And I don't care if the door makes noises as you go, because I know you've got
I do
another
have to sneak
appointment.
out. God bless
I
y'all.
really
Thank you.
appreciate
See ya.
your staying a little bit.
Thanks
longer
again.
with us. God bless you, Jeff Leach. And Lathan.
I answer to both. I've been called worse.
I know you've been called Nathan by me before. But Lathan, I'm so grateful to you also for being in studio. You make so much common sense, not only on the issues of religious freedom, which is what you're tasked with at this point in your life, but also just, I know you're a thinker about political issues and cultural issues. So a little bit later in the program when we've got the national audience, we're going to unpack this a lot more, because I think it's really an important topic. But actually, we've only got a minute before the break. But I will say that I'm so glad to hear what happened at the American Legion Convention, and we'll talk about that later in the program, too. And I do want you, in the next segment, to tell me about the Orthodox Jewish matter that you and First Liberty have been dealing with here, because there are some developments on that. And I understand that the Coach Kennedy case, which the Supreme Court sent back all the way down to the lower courts, which is, and I was discouraged. I wanted them to actually take the case. But they've done that, and there's a lot of hope for the Coach Kennedy case and the ability, because in his situation, it was after football games. And so it's kind of fun to think about it now as football season is starting. But he was blasted for praying after a game by himself. I mean, people used to want to join him, but even by himself. And that case went all the way up the courts and back down. But in light of now the new set of justices and some of the other cases, including the Bladensburg case, perhaps things will be a little different. I want to get your take on that, and we'll do all of that right after this. The idea that the United States might purchase Greenland has been called comical, imperialistic, even unthinkable since President Trump floated it a couple of weeks ago. Greenland is part of Denmark, and the Danish Prime Minister found the idea absurd. Washington Post columnist Mark Thiessen points out some of the advantages this purchase could bring. We don't need a military base in Greenland. We already have one. Thule Air Force Base, the U.S. Air Force's northernmost facility. But a really good reason to buy Greenland would be for its rich stores of minerals, resources Denmark has not been able or willing to exploit, including zinc, lead, gold, diamonds, copper, and uranium. Greenland is also attractive because of its rare earth elements, which, Mr. Thiessen writes, are critical to the production of everything from electric cars to smartphones and lasers. Currently, China supplies us with many of these elements, but we could easily be cut off due to our trade dispute. The Chinese are trying to corner the market for Greenland's rare earth minerals. Buying Greenland would put us in control of these strategically important minerals. Greenland's primary value to the United States, though, would be to provide a sea route in the Arctic. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo recently stated, quote, "Steady reductions in sea ice are opening new passageways and new opportunities for trade." He says this could potentially slash the time it takes to travel between Asia and the West by as much as 20 days. Secretary Pompeo pointed out that these emerging sea lanes in the Arctic could become the 21st century Suez and Panama canals. Buying Greenland would also be advantageous militarily, serving to elbow out China and Russia, both of whom have aggressively targeted the Arctic with bases, scientific research stations, and strategic investments. And Greenlanders would benefit economically. The U.S. can afford to do much more than Denmark can to develop the island. Buying Greenland is actually a great idea. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Well, it's your Friday edition of Point of View, and I'm Penna Dexter. Lathan Watts is in studio, and we've had a lot of fun with State Representative Jeff Leach and getting an update. But I do want to just kind of get you to update us on a couple of things here. And one of them, of course, is Coach Kennedy. And I know that this is going to be a long haul to get him back up to the Supreme Court. Where are we at?
So I know listeners have probably heard us talk about Coach Kennedy for a long time now, but I also know it's one of those cases that everywhere I go, somebody asks me, hey, what's going on with Coach Kennedy? So Last year we had his case up, in front of the Supreme Court. They decided not to take the case. However, they did something very rare when they list cases on the denied list. They actually attached a little note with their denial that, in layman's terms, said, we don't think this is the right time to take this case. We find the Ninth Circuit's opinion very troubling. However, there's some things that we think should have been cleared up at the district court level, so that if this case was in front of us, we would be able to deal with the big First Amendment issue. So, and then right towards the end, they added a little a note at the end that says, we see that this case was brought to us on free speech grounds, and the petitioner clearly has a free exercise claim. But perhaps that free exercise claim wasn't brought to us because of some decisions by this court that have made those claims difficult. Decisions by this court which we have not yet been asked to review. Exactly. That's everything but the eye wink emoji saying, hey, maybe you should ask us to review these cases. So what we're doing right now is that little note was basically like a playbook from the Supreme Court as to here's what you should do to clear up some of the kind of extraneous issues and get the First Amendment issue as clear as possible and bring it back. So that's what we're doing right now. So we're back at district court level in Washington, and we're addressing some of those things at the district court level. Once those are clarified, we'll then see how the case moves up from there.
So I got an email from First Liberty today, I think it was this morning, and they're tying all of their news and articles to football this week, which is very interesting.
Football season again.
Yes, that's right. Even though the High Court, you say, opted not to hear the case earlier this year and effectively reset the game clock by sending his case, this is Coach Kennedy's case, back to the trial court, this Marine and combat veteran has no plans to run from the fight. Now, as Coach Joe says, it's time to move the chains. And the piece was written by your George Gomez there at First Liberty. He says, it's very clever. We are hopeful that the bad calls he's endured for the past 3 seasons will be reversed. That's exactly right. So, like I said, we're following that to keep up with the football metaphor. We're following that playbook that we got from the Supreme Court. And we're going to give the lower courts, every opportunity to fix what they got wrong the first time. But if they don't, we'll continue up the chain and we'll take it back to the Supreme Court. And hopefully, if we get to that point, we will also have the opportunity, as they noted in their little opinion they attached, we'll have the opportunity to ask them to review those bad decisions related to the free exercise clause, and hopefully get rid of those the same way we got rid of bad decisions in the speech or the establishment clause section of the First Amendment with the Bladensburg decision. So there's great opportunity here. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick. This case has already gone on for many years, and it's probably going to go on for quite a bit longer. So pray for Coach Kennedy and his family, because and all our clients, frankly, because the time these things take can take a toll. Yes, and so, yes, it can. But like George said in the article, Coach is a Marine. There's no quit in him, and he is committed to taking this all the way until we get it the resolution that and not just for him, but for everybody in America, for your right to live according to what you believe, and that's really what's at stake here. One more case that I'd like to discuss in this segment with you, because it really involves, it's local. It's a local case. I mean, as all of your work affects the entire nation, because different precedents are set and different legal just principles are either affirmed or thrown out. So this one has to do with the Jewish congregation, Orthodox synagogue located right here in Dallas. And this has been going on for 6 years. You have to have a lot of patience to be in your line of work, I know, Lathan.
Especially our clients.
But there's actually a victory here.
Yes, we were very happy that we were able to finally get the city of Dallas to issue a certificate of occupancy to Rabbi Rich, our
He's your
client here in Dallas. Sorry, my phone somehow thought that I was asking Siri a question here, so I had to turn that off. So the city will be issuing a certificate of occupancy. Now, why is that important? So he's an Orthodox Jewish rabbi. The Orthodox Jewish community lives nearby, and he hosts them in his home for worship and
That's
for other
their
meetings.
synagogue.
That's where they worship.
Yeah.
And because he was sort of renovating or making some alterations to his home to accommodate that, that triggered all the building codes and everything that goes into the joy that is dealing with city government. And for the last 5 years, they have been fighting over lots of minuscule details. The last sticking point, which was the amount of parking spaces available. Now, keep in mind, these are Orthodox Jews, and they're prohibited from driving on the Sabbath. So on the day that his home is the most full of worshipers, they walk there. So just last week, we were finally able to dot all the I's, cross all the T's, and finish this with the city of Dallas. So he will have his certificate of occupancy. They will be free to worship in his home, as they should be. And we're very, very happy for them. It only took 5 years for the city of Dallas to do the right thing. So there's an old adage in politics that says you can't fight City Hall. We would say you can, and you can win. It helps if you have a law firm that doesn't charge you anything.
Well, that's what I was going to mention, because they wouldn't have been able to fight this fight if they had not had your help, because it would have broken them. They couldn't have afforded it. And that's what is just, it's just such a wonderful gift to folks who are fighting. Really, it's hard to fight the battle anyway. Financially is one thing, but there's a lot of other time constraints and things. So the fact that you take that burden is like gold.
Well,
literally.
And honestly, most of our clients would never be able to take the stand that they do if we were billing them, on the hourly rate that our attorneys would charge in private practice, and our volunteer attorneys in private practice would charge. It would just be cost prohibitive, and that's why a lot of people don't stand up, because they don't know that there are firms out there like First Liberty that will represent you for free, and that's part of my job is getting that word out there. That look, you don't have to be afraid of this sort of thing. You have the right to live according to your faith, and if doing so lands you in some sort of controversy or trouble, contact us, because you will never get a bill from us. None of our clients ever do. That's why we operate, the way we do as a nonprofit. So it's a great blessing to be able to do that and have that be your day job. And it's a good cause to get up and go to work for every day. And hopefully your listeners will let their friends and family know, so that they know who to contact if they run across issues related to living out your faith.
And folks can go to pointofview.net and see your picture and click through to First Liberty Institute website. I love the website, and there's also a lot of ways people can stay informed about religious liberty by signing up for various emails that you guys send out. And so, I highly recommend that. You can stay informed just by doing that. We'll be back.
It wasn't long ago, it seemed, every official decision brought religious liberty and our ability to live as faithful Christians into question. Some of us wondered how long it would be before we were literally forced to choose between obeying God or men. That pressure seems to have subsided just a bit, and now is the time not to take a breath, but to work as hard as we can for the future of our nation. Thanks to you, Point of View is doing just that. And our special thanks to those who have become members of Truth Team 360. In football, 22 guys battle it out on the field while 40 or 60,000 watch in the stands, and perhaps hundreds of thousands more watch on television. We need a special few to get out of the seats and into the game. Join today by calling 1-800-347-5151 and ask to join the Truth Team, or visit us online at pointofview.net/team. We really do need you. The nation needs you. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. I am Penna Dexter. This is your Friday weekend edition of Point of View. Lathan Watts from First Liberty Institute is also with me in studio. And Lathan, it's been an interesting week, and, you know, we have news to talk about, which we will, but we also have sort of some polling results and some concepts that are going to affect the next election and really the future of the country. And I want to kind of dig into some of those today with you, too. So we will do that here on Point of View. We've posted a few things that should help you to, if you'd like to take advantage of them. One is an article about this new study from the Wall Street Journal, NBC, which basically says Americans have shifted dramatically on what values matter most. And the values of patriotism, religion, and having children, millennials and Gen Z are, they just rate a lot lower on all of those. Patriotism isn't as important by 9 points. Religion is not as important. That's really no surprise. And having children is way less important to that generation. Part of it could be because of their age, but I think there are other reasons. So we will unpack that. And then we're also going to talk about the elections. Matt McCoyak, which I have actually posted a piece of his, Democratic overconfidence may be their undoing in 2020. And we'll get a little bit into the Electoral College, a discussion we started last week on the weekend edition. There are certainly desires on the part of many to abolish it. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says that it's, she called it something very interesting. Oh, affirmative action for rural voters. Is it? We'll talk about that. And then we're going to talk about the American Legion Convention. Mike Pence said the Bible stays, and we'll have you explain that later in the program. So we've got a lot to talk about today. And I think I want to start, though, with, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but the Inspector General came out with one of their reports that they've been working on that has been highly, I guess, prejudged. And I don't know if we're really surprised by it, but basically, Comey, as director of the FBI, this report says violated Department of Justice policy by releasing several memos, which he wrote, about conversations with President Trump. 7 memos. He would write them because he wanted to, I guess, set in writing for all to know about and see what went on between him and President Trump. Well, once he was fired by the president, rather than turn those over, he kept them, and he did release a couple of them to a friend who he instructed then to release to the press. And so a lot of that was not kosher, not right, and this IG report states that. He's been declared guilty of those things, but there will be no prosecution by the FBI or anyone else. There really shouldn't be for this, but he's seeing it as a victory, and I would say it's not a victory. It's just a lesson.
Yeah, I'll be really, really happy when this guy's 15 minutes are up. This is he's a perfect example of why you don't want politicians in law enforcement.
Yeah, he's more of a politician than a law enforcement guy.
Absolutely is. And you're right. He made those notes and then leaked them because that's what political operatives do. If you're taking notes or you're recording a conversation or whatever you're doing it to cover your own rear end, and that's exactly what he was doing. And like I said, I'll be happy when I stop hearing the name James Comey in the news.
So as a result of it, though, because he said he had a reason for it, and the reason was he wanted to get a special counsel to look into the president and the collusion with Russia issue. And so there were big consequences for the country for things that he did. 2 years of this, $32 million spent on it. And, it's really not over. I mean, the attacks just continue. And I thought it was funny, and this has been, a lot of people have reported this and kind of made a joke out of it. But after his 2017 meeting with Trump, one of them, he said, it's kind of funny. Well, it is funny that he said this. This is his quote. I said I don't do sneaky things. I don't leak. I don't do weasel things.
And then he went and handed over his notes to his friend to leak to the New York Times. So, his goal, as he said, his stated goal was to see a special prosecutor appointed. Well, if you think one is warranted, you're the head of the FBI. Why did you not go to the Attorney General and the Department of Justice and say, I think this warrants a special investigation?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just silly the way he did things. But there's another IG report that's going to be coming out, and there's another report by this Connecticut federal attorney, U.S. attorney from the District of Connecticut, investigating the origins of the Russian collusion investigation. So investigating the investigation. But in this case, I think it's needed.
There was, because what Comey and his team did in both the farce of an investigation into the Clinton campaign and the private server and the deleted emails and all of that, and all the hoops they went through to be able to say there's nothing going on here, and then all the hoops they jumped through to be able to say there is something going on here when they're talking about the president. I mean, it's clear that this is a symptom of a politicized law enforcement agency. And we as Americans should be able to expect that law enforcement, as much as it is humanly possible, because they are human beings, everybody's got their own political beliefs. But when it comes to enforcement of the law, politics should not be a part of that equation. The law is what it is. Someone either violated it or they didn't. And Comey is the perfect example of the over-politicization of the federal law enforcement. And we've seen the fallout from it. It continues. It's investigating of the investigator. Folks in the House want to have more hearings and hearings about hearings and what have you. And, all the while, not a whole lot is getting done. I think the Democrat majority in the House has completely squandered the 2 years that they were in control of the House, and with investigations and hearings and impeachment articles and all of these other things. And I think that will be a factor in the next election.
Do you?
I do. I mean, I think they're going to have maybe a bit of a challenge, especially those House members going back to their districts to talk about, well, here's what we did. And they have completely motivated their opposition's base voters by continuing to come after the president with investigation after investigation. It's anything can happen between now and November of next year, but I don't think that they have made good use of the time they had control of the House of Representatives.
Yeah, I can't think of a whole lot of substantive issues that have been dealt with. And, of course, you could say that's because we've got one party in control of the Senate and one of the House, but still could have done some things. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a lot more, and we'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Executives at Google may claim that they are not biased against conservatives, but information from engineers who work for Google tell a different story. One of those engineers is Greg Coppola. He went public last month in an interview with Project Veritas, and after that interview, he was put on administrative leave. He explains that the algorithms used by Google don't write themselves. Software programmers write them to do what they want them to do. That makes sense to me. I wrote computer programs years ago and don't claim to have the expertise of those writing programs at Google, but it does seem like even machine language and machine learning can be easily manipulated to give biased results. Another Google engineer that has come forward is Zachary Voorhees. He also leaked documents from Google to Project Veritas. One of those documents provided evidence of what he called algorithmic unfairness. Once Google figured out that he was the person who leaked the documents, they took two actions. First, they demanded the material be returned. Then they sent law enforcement officials to his home to perform a wellness check. This was a blatant attempt at intimidating him. The one document he leaked that got my attention was the news blacklist used by Google. Lots of organizations and websites that we use to get information and educate our listeners was on the list. Christian Post, Daily Caller, Life News, American Thinker are just a few of a long list of sites on the Google blacklist. Another leaked document from Google ranked news sources in order of their credibility. ABC, CBS, PBS, CNN, and MSNBC were all ranked higher than Fox News. The investigative report by Project Veritas and the publication of these Google documents from insiders illustrate that there is indeed a bias in the way that this company aggregates and displays data. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Affirm Films and the Kendrick Brothers, Overcomer, starring Alex Kendrick and Priscilla Shire, rated PG, now playing in theaters. Overcomermovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. It's sort of an election discussion here on our Friday weekend edition. Lathan Watts is with me in studio. And Lathan, this week, well, not this week, but every week, Joe Biden seems to get his share of mocking and some of it earned. Just laughter for different gaffes that are taking place. But there was a poll that came out that we saw in discussion at the beginning of the week, the Monmouth poll, which actually showed him a little bit below, like 1 point below, I think it was 19%, and Sanders was at 20%, and so was Elizabeth Warren. And everybody jumped on that. Oh, Biden's, he's dropping, and these two are heading up to the top, and it's going to be different now. But all the other polls that came out that were national polls put him back up ahead by a lot sometimes. So, in fact, well, the interesting thing about that Monmouth poll was that in June he was at 32%. So that was a big drop in that poll. But it's a fairly small one. And so we also have to say, though, that the national polls don't matter that much. What matters is the polls of the swing states, right?
Well, yes. I mean, national polls would be the equivalent of if we had a national popular vote, and we don't.
Which a lot of people would love to have.
Right, but we don't. That's not the system that we have. We have 50 individual state elections. So, and polling at this point, even though we're getting closer, but still at this point, polling is probably, the results anyway, are probably have as much to do with name ID than they do anything else. And so Joe Biden obviously has name ID. He's been around forever. And the folks that you mentioned, Sanders and Warren, certainly have name ID. So it makes sense that they would be at the top of this poll. Now, if you're a candidate, there's really only two ways to run. Run scared or you're running behind. And he should be running scared right now if you see a drop that big from one poll to the next. If you were formerly at 32%, now you're at 19%, you better figure out why. And that may be the only thing that's actually significant out of this poll.
I don't know with Joe Biden, though. Do you think that Joe Biden could actually – he has a great campaign operation, but the candidate themselves matters. And do you think that he could actually improve his performance? You think he'd
Yes.
be – but do you think he is capable of it?
Is he capable? Yeah, so that's two different questions. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is he capable of it? That's a totally different question. I don't know if the drop in the poll has as much to do with, the gaffe of the day or the gaffe of the week. But there were other stories out there related to this poll where they were quoting unnamed sources that the campaign's idea was we need to keep him out of the public. we need to reduce his number of public speaking.
You can't do that with a presidential candidate.
Right. But he is known for, gaffes when it comes to public speaking. And he's been known for it for a long time. And this is what you get with Joe Biden. And so it's going to be an interesting calculation for voters on the left. If they are willing to sort of put up with that, if they think he is the most viable chance to beat President Trump in 2020. And that's really what it comes down to for them is you're seeing it amongst the candidates now starting to talk about who's the best bet to beat Donald Trump. Because on issues, there's really not that much difference between any of them. I mean, you can pick a few here and there, but between Sanders, Warren, Biden, the rest of the field, there's not that many policy differences, big picture wise.
Yeah.
So it for them it becomes about who is the candidate on our side who has the best chance of winning in the general election, and when Biden keeps going on and telling these stories, and then the next headline is the number of inaccuracies in a 3-minute story. That's going to be a factor. People are going to have to figure that out. Democrat primary voters are going to have to make that judgment call.
Yes, and I think right now to make that call, to start thinking if you're a Democrat who you would see as the one that can beat President Trump, the debates are very helpful. And the next debate is September 12th. And this debate is going to be different because it's probably going to be about half the size. Of course, I guess they got some help when Senator Gillibrand of New York and Mayor de Blasio of New York City both dropped out. Mm-hmm. And so they're out. And the debate lineup is going to be, some of the names that a lot of folks know. Some of the people that haven't made it are, I think, the ones that are actually calling out the financial realities about some of the Democrats' proposals. For instance, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, free health care for illegals, slavery reparations. So all of these things are ideas that are being, bantied about, and very little discussion of how to pay for it, except among Bennett, Delaney, Bullock, and Ryan, those 4 candidates, but none of them are making it. They're probably not going to be on the debate stage, and you will probably see them drop out soon.
Right. I mean, that's the reality of how long presidential campaigns are now. In previous elections, going back a few election cycles, sort of an outsider candidate like that had probably a better chance because the campaigning season, if you want to call it that, was shorter. And so you didn't have to have as much money to run a campaign. There's an amount of money you'd have to run a national campaign for 1 year versus 2 years. I mean, that's a big difference, right? So somebody who could, maybe make a splash in a debate, pick up a windfall of fundraising after a good debate performance, could keep the train moving. But when that campaign season is now close to 2 years, that takes a lot of money. And so these also rans that you just mentioned, that's why these campaigns are ending so frequently now. I mean, you start out with 20, a lot of them are gonna go by the wayside, but that's why. It costs a lot of money to run a nationwide campaign, and when you have to run that campaign for as long as people are these days, money becomes an even bigger factor in who can last, who can stay in the race. So it'll be interesting to see these folks who have stopped their campaigns, if they come out and then endorse anybody else. When you've got single digit support in the polls, it's not really that important who you endorse, because they're not that interested in the 1 or 2% of people.
Once we're down to maybe 6 or 8,
right?
That'll be more important.
But but the statement that they make by coming out, say if Gillibrand came out and endorsed, fill in the blank, that's still a former presidential candidate saying, of the people that are left, I'm with this guy or this girl.
Yeah,
and that's a way that some of these candidates can have some influence on shaping the debate within their party, even though they're not.
Yeah, I wonder about these
themselves.
moderates, quote unquote moderates. They all support the Green New Deal, I think, but the ones that are giving some fiscal warnings about these proposals, I do wonder if they were to endorse, if that would, because the average Democrat is not a socialist. Like, I hate to call them socialists, but some of these candidates are proposing socialist programs. And so if some of these people like Ryan were to endorse someone, would that say something about, okay, this is the person I think is the most electable, reasonable candidate?
Possibly. But when you look at the proposals that you're talking about, if the trillions of dollars it would take to implement these, if you're the most fiscally sane out of people that are making these types of proposals, like being the healthiest guy at a leper colony. I don't know that it really says a whole lot. And I think the general voting public, once they finally get around to starting to pay attention, because we're getting closer, but the swing voter, the unaffiliated voter who's not a diehard Republican, not a diehard Democrat, they're probably not paying real close attention yet. And once they do, and the nominee is proposing X number of $1 trillion of spending to combat fill in the blank, I think they're going to have a tough time selling that to middle America. And
yes. Most polls show that most of the candidates can beat, or some of the top tier Democrats can beat President Trump. But as Matt Makoviak mentions in a piece that we posted at pointofview.net, Democratic overconfidence may be their undoing in 2020 because their policies that they're proposing are so progressive, just as you just mentioned, Lathan. So, what do you think? Are the Democrats overconfident? Give us a call, 800-351-1212. We'll be right back.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And Lathan Watts, Director of Legal Communications at First Liberty Institute. We're talking politics right now and taking your calls at 800-351-1212. And the question I asked was, do you think the Democrats' overconfidence may be their undoing in 2020? And that's the title of the article by Matt Makoviak. We posted it at pointofview.net. And, the overconfidence has resulted, Lathan, in these progressive candidates feeling very free to propose all kinds of giant, utopian, expensive programs. And, they're doing that right now, and it's all exciting for the people that are on the left and a lot of folks that don't understand that you have to pay the piper. But it may hurt them in the end.
It could. Yeah. When, as the article points out, when you're overconfident, when you think, well, we've got this sewn up, we can nominate whoever we want because anybody who's not Trump is going to win, then there's this temptation to say, well, let's get the most, radical, rabid, ideological purist of our type in that spot, because here's a once in a lifetime,
like a Bernie Sanders, like an Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, because this may be a once in a generation opportunity where we've got just a free pass. We know we're going to win, so let's put, as far left as we can get. Let's put that person in the White House. If the shoe
it almost never works on either side.
It really doesn't, because you have, you have the ideologues on both sides, in both ends of the spectrum. And then you have kind of the general public that is probably not as ideologically strident as the real hard chargers in both party. You have a lot of voters who are unaffiliated, don't have no party affiliation. They election to election, they may go back or forth.
Independent or swing voter.
Yeah, exactly. And they can sometimes be the difference in a close race. So that's why historically you hear this thing about, you talk to the base in the primary, and then you move to the center and talk to the general public in the general. But
it's always a acrobatic balancing act to move. That moving back to the center is not as easy as
it never is.
For some people, it's not easy,
and especially if you have gone so far in one direction during the primary, and this would apply to either party. This challenge is either way. If you have staked out positions that are to the extreme end of your ideological spectrum or your party, and then you have to go to the general election and try to explain to the folks in the middle why that's a good thing, that can be a tough sell. And that's what I think Makoviak is talking about here, that if you're too confident that, whoever we nominate is going to win, so let's put the most extreme ideas forward because we know we're going to win, and therefore we can put them into practice. And then you may end up with a candidate who is too extreme for the middle and the general election, and end up costing you the election, when you might have had, and there's no doubt that this will likely be a tough fight. It always is. There are a few elections that stand out in history where
there's a lot of
landslide.
Negative opinion of President Trump, so
right.
that's part of this.
But national elections are typically competitive, But if you, as I said, if you're overconfident, and that's the point of his piece, and you put somebody who's too extreme on either side, you have a hard time selling that to the middle and to the folks, and not even the middle, maybe even folks in your own party who are, hey, I'm a typical Republican, but this guy is too right wing for me.
Yeah, like I'm going to lose my employer provided health insurance.
Right.
There's a lot of Democrats that are going to be in that position and wondering about some of these proposals.
Yeah, absolutely. And they may not cross over and vote for the other guy, but if they're not motivated to vote for your guy and they stay home, that's just as damaging.
Okay, so then if you look at President Trump, right now, some of his advantages, he's probably going to have a fairly unified Republican Party behind him. The people that are running, that are primarying him, they have no chance. And he's also got a much better campaign. This Matt Makoviak points this out, than he did in 2016. And when you think about his campaign, it was kind of on the fly, and he funded it, and then it just sort of grew over time because he was doing so well in the poll. But he is raising record sums of money, and he's also got a great data operation now, and really an organization that is going to be very helpful. And the other part of it is he's great on the debate stage, and he's going to have to, whoever takes him on they've got to be a good debater. And if they're a good debater and they're so far to the left, he's going to be able to make mincemeat of them because of that too.
I think he will do his best to point out how far left the person is. I mean, if you look at who the top contenders are right now.
And he will mock them.
He will. And, he prides himself on not being a politician, but you can, if you've watched over the last few years, and even in the previous campaign, from the beginning of the campaign to the end of it, how he grew as a candidate, and he did pick up some of these skills. Some of it, he had probably naturally. He probably likes to argue and is probably a pretty good debater. And he brought kind of atypical debate skills to a presidential debate. And I don't think those have gone anywhere. And he is a formidable presence on screen, which a lot of, the presidential debate now, really since Kennedy-Nixon, the first big TV presidential debate, has been about the show that is the debate. And, there's all sorts of things that people analyze, the body language, the soundbite, who gave the best answer to this or who got the most digs in at the other guy. And there's, every cable news network, as soon as the debate's over, they analyze it for the next 3 hours. So he's got a lot of natural ability in things that get analyzed these days when it comes to debates. A lot of the analysis has to do with sort of the gamesmanship as much as it does the policy that's discussed. And, Trump is pretty good at that stuff.
So what do you think? Do you think that the Democrats are hurting themselves right now with the left-wing positions that are being espoused? Well, let's go to the phones. Randy is in Missouri. He's called, and he actually wants to talk about the IG report, which we will do. Randy, thank you for calling. Randy's in Missouri.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I kind of wanted to take exception to your premise. Last night on Tucker Carlson, the professor they always get on from the Hoover Institute, he kind of explained it like this, that a small group of James Comey conspirators at the FBI co-conspirators simply got together and decided to declassify the 3 memos that he intentionally leaked to the press on the meetings that he had with the president, which were felonies. And because they declassified them, that gave the Department of Justice the excuse not to indict him. So, he should have been indicted. He should be indicted for that. There's dozens of people at the FBI and the Department of Justice that already should be indicted by a grand jury. I don't have any faith in Bob Barr to get anything done, or Mr. Durham in the proceedings of these investigations, because the track record of the IG has been to cover up and obfuscate the crimes that they're investigating. It's on record. I mean, this was an attempt to overthrow the president of the United States, a sitting elected president. This went far beyond his election process, and you had people in the government working to unseat a sitting president. That's sedition.
Well, I appreciate your bringing up the seriousness of the repercussions of this. We don't want to downplay that, and so I appreciate that. Thank you, Randy. Nathan, what do you think?
Well, I mean, Nathan? He's exactly right. I mean, this is not the first time or the first demonstration that there seems to be 2 justice systems, one for everybody else and one for the political operatives in D.C. If there wasn't, Lois Lerner would be in jail right now.
You know, sometimes I think even people like me get used to them getting by with things.
Yeah, and it's sad that we do, and it shouldn't be that way. And I think Randy's right that there are things that went on here that could have been prosecuted, should have been prosecuted, and you won't see this sort of thing stop until they are prosecuted. When there's consequences for actions, you might see this sort of thing a little less often.
You might. 800-351-1212 is the number. We are taking your calls, and we're sort of in the thick of election discussion. We will continue that right after this. Stay with us. The idea that the United States might purchase Greenland has been called comical, imperialistic, even unthinkable since President Trump floated it a couple of weeks ago. Greenland is part of Denmark, and the Danish Prime Minister found the idea absurd. Washington Post columnist Mark Thiessen points out some of the advantages this purchase could bring. We don't need a military base in Greenland. We already have one. Thule Air Force Base, the U.S. Air Force's northernmost facility. But a really good reason to buy Greenland would be for its rich stores of minerals, resources Denmark has not been able or willing to exploit, including zinc, lead, gold, diamonds, copper, and uranium. Greenland is also attractive because of its rare earth elements, which, Mr. Thiessen writes, are critical to the production of everything from electric cars to smartphones and lasers. Currently, China supplies us with many of these elements, but we could easily be cut off due to our trade dispute. The Chinese are trying to corner the market for Greenland's rare earth minerals. Buying Greenland would put us in control of these strategically important minerals. Greenland's primary value to the United States, though, would be to provide a sea route in the Arctic. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo recently stated, quote, "Steady reductions in sea ice are opening new passageways and new opportunities for trade." He says this could potentially slash the time it takes to travel between Asia and the West by as much as 20 days. Secretary Pompeo pointed out that these emerging sea lanes in the Arctic could become the 21st century Suez and Panama canals. Buying Greenland would also be advantageous militarily, serving to elbow out China and Russia, both of whom have aggressively targeted the Arctic with bases, scientific research stations, and strategic investments. And Greenlanders would benefit economically. The U.S. can afford to do much more than Denmark can to develop the island. Buying Greenland is actually a great idea. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. Lathan Watts is here. We're discussing the election. Matt Makowiak wrote that if Democrats were smart, they would value electability over purity. That's liberal purity, socialist purity, given the stakes of the 2020 election. Right now, their overconfidence is removing electability from the discussion. Do you think that's true? 800-351-1212. Let's take some calls. Adam is in California. Actually, let's go to Whitney in Nevada. Hi, Whitney. Thanks for calling. We'll get to Adam later.
Hi.
Hi. What do you think about, is this what you called about? A Democrat overconfidence may be their undoing in 2020. Do you think so?
That's a good way to talk talk about it, but let me talk about something even better. How about that? Can I say that?
Sure.
Why don't we, for Christians in America, focus on Christian running for office locally, nationally, and Christian come out and support those Christians who's running for office?
Yes, we had a great, I don't know if you were listening in the first hour, we had a great example of that. Jeff Leach is in the Texas legislature, and he was in studio with us talking about lots of these things. And he grew up in a Christian home, one that discussed patriotism. I believe he was public school educated, at least up until college, and that did not mean that he didn't become very patriotic and have a very strong faith-driven desire to serve his country, which he has done. And that's the kind of thing we do want to encourage. In fact, that's something that Point of View has been about since its inception. And we've got a lot of stories to tell of different people who have gotten involved because of that. And I do think, Whitey, that, and I mispronounced your name before, I do think that you are absolutely right. Christians do need to be involved. In fact, it's really a stewardship and a responsibility that we have.
I agree with you, but then we have enough Christian bloc in this country, 92, 93, 95 million Christians. All they need to wake up and smell the coffee.
So what would be an example of that? I mean, are you talking about the fact that Christians support President Trump?
Oh, no, I'm not talking about him per se. I'm talking about Christians running for office.
Okay.
Coming out to vote for the Christians, men and women, locally and nationally.
Yeah, we were talking presidential, so, that's one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of already, we know who, we know the choice we're going to have on the Republican side.
Yeah.
We already know that. But yes, all the way down ballot, certainly it's wonderful when Christians get involved. But they have to, that's not their only resume item. They have to build a resume based on lots of things, including community involvement, including listening to constituents, including being able to articulate positions and working in the trenches of politics in order to earn their votes.
90 over million, I'm sure we can find 50, 60, 100 to do that. Okay, go ahead.
I think it's a very good encouragement. Thank you for weighing in there, Lathan.
And thank you so much for your program, and have a wonderful Labor Day weekend and a safe one too.
You too.
Yeah, he brings up a good point. If you are concerned about the direction of the country, if you're continually feeling like you're holding your nose and voting for somebody because of the lesser of evils, the only way that will change is the more people get involved and more people like Jeff, who was here before, decide to actually become candidates themselves. Now, you don't have to, you don't have to run off and run for president. Run for school board.
Most people that run for president are not like President Trump, and that's the first thing they ever ran for.
Exactly.
It's pretty rare.
And you can have, especially at the local level, a big impact on your local community. And, not everybody's cut out for it. I served 4 years on my city council and enjoyed the time there. But not everybody has the will or the desire or the skills sometimes necessary to be a good elected official or a good candidate. But you may have other skills. And if you find that person who does sort of represent the values you want to see in office, you go volunteer and work on their campaign and become more involved that way. But it will take lots of good people running for office. You're not necessarily going to win every time. Most people that, especially who have been in politics for a long time or who have advanced up the chain, probably can look back and say, yeah, I lost that election and I learned from it and I came back later and I won and I'm a better candidate for it. But that's a core American value. If you don't like what you see in government, then do something about it.
Amen. All right, Adam is in California. We said we would take this call from him. Adam, thank you for calling. You're on Point of View.
Yes, thank you so much. And I just wanted to make 3 points. I lost you guys 3 times, so it was meant to be. My first point is a lot of people don't hear the Christian surroundings that Trump's in leadership and legal advising, like Jay Sekulow, those names that are inspiring him to be the president that he is. That's my first point. The second point is that people are real quick to say that there's not enough Christian influence in the government and politics, and there really has been more now that Trump's in office than ever, that are actually bold enough to say that they have this freedom of choice for their religious beliefs. And my last point is that, my last point was the fact that we are becoming aware of the things that our own government is being exposed that they get away with when it comes to contradicting or disrespecting our president, our morals, and our standards as Americans. Under doubt.
Wait, say that again, because I'm not sure I understood that one.
That our moral standards as American citizens and the respect for our president is becoming more aware that people get away with not holding those standards anymore.
Okay, yeah. You've made 3 good points, Adam. I'm glad that you were actually able to call back and get a line that you could actually speak with us on. And I think that I think a lot of people are aware of the Christians around Trump. In fact, some people are very critical of that. But there are Christians that are advising him, and they're having an impact because Lathan, I mean, we look at, for instance, what he's done in the area of religious liberty. I don't think he would have even known that religious liberty was being violated under Obama. I don't think he would have really known that if the Christians had not been in his aura and advising him.
He's been very good on the issue of religious liberty, and you don't have to be particularly religious to understand the importance of religious liberty. And I don't know the president, and he certainly doesn't know me, and I don't know what goes on in his mind or in his heart or how devout or not he is. But even people who are not religious can understand the importance of religious liberty, and he clearly does, or at the very least he understands how important it is to the people that elected him, and he has followed through on his promise to protect it. With the types of judges that he's appointed, with his executive orders on religious liberty. We've talked about these things many times on this program, but he's been very good on the issue of religious liberty.
Earlier in the week, we reported on and discussed the Democrat outreach to religious people. But now there's some new news out. The Democrats are actually reaching out in a big way to people who hold no religion as a group that they identify as their voters. What do you think of that? We will talk about it after this. We've got a long break, but stay with us.
Point of View is committed to spreading the truth, oftentimes a truth that those in political power don't like getting heard. But the only way it can be heard is if our teams stand strong together, if you do what you can to support the Point of View Truth Team. It's having an impact, as we heard recently from U.S. Representative Louis Gohmert.
Everywhere I go, I hear people that you have influenced, that Point of View has affected. You have made such a difference, and you rely on people to contribute, and if they don't contribute, then that truth does not get heard.
Help Point of View make a difference. Pray and consider what level is right for you. $30, $65, $100 a month, or even more. Please do what you can. 1-800-347-5151, or visit online, pointofview.net. Look near the top right for the link that says Become a Monthly Partner. Join the Truth Team, 800-347-5151, and pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I've recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
And I'm in studio for our Friday weekend edition with Lathan Watts from First Liberty Institute. And we are talking election politics and really asking the question, and we'd love you to join us. Are the Democrats overconfident, and is this going to actually be their undoing in 2020? We posted an article from Matt Makoviak at pointofview.net. And so we will continue that discussion. And we're also going to talk about this poll. Nick Pitts and company, all the millennials, talked about it on, I believe it was Tuesday. Americans have shifted dramatically on what values matter most: patriotism, religion, and having children rate lower among younger generations than they did 2 decades ago. It's an important poll, and we've posted an article by Michael Knowles. He's a talk show host. Americans are living off the fumes of religion. That's a pretty interesting premise to try to explain this poll. Why do you think, and we'll ask you too, we'll open the phones about this, why do you think that millennials and Gen Z are much lower on the patriotism scale? They don't think it's as important. Also religion, also having babies. They don't think that's as important by large margins as their age group did back in, what year was that? Lathan, a couple decades ago, yeah. 2 decades ago. So that's going to be an important discussion. And then we're going to update you on what happened at the American Legion Convention, which is just emblematic of the importance of the decision about the Bladensburg Memorial that the Supreme Court took earlier this summer. It's got great repercussions across the board. So we will discuss all of that here on Point of View. But Lathan and I he brought to my attention an article about what the Democrats just did at their meeting. They unanimously passed a resolution praising non-religious voters, the religiously unaffiliated. They're going after them in the elections. This is the largest, the religiously unaffiliated, Lathan, are the largest religious group within the Democratic Party. It's interesting because Robert Jeffress, who's he's pastor of First Baptist Church of Dallas, he's a Trump advisor. He said finally they're getting realistic about things, and they're going after this group and coming to terms with who they are.
Yeah, this is a kind of an interesting development. I think they've basically just sort of put it in writing, which is making it official.
But what does that say to all the Catholic Democrats? For instance?
What they're putting in writing is sort of the undercurrent of their politics, which has been going on for a while now. That they had a hard time trying to dance around when they would talk to religious voters. But remember, this is the party that at the last national convention booed God.
That's right.
So
but I don't know if that went over real well with the rank and file.
Right. But what I guess my point is, and I think that's the point of the article, is that they're not really trying to hide it or spin it or disguise it, or whatever you want to call it anymore. They made it official. And it's comical to me, like the article says, that the religiously unaffiliated are the largest religious group. How can they be a religious group if they're? I mean, I get people have their own ideas about spirituality.
It's
or whatever.
Called atheism as a religion.
I guess. but if you're like Penna, like you were saying, if you're a Democrat voter, in the Midwest or the South, and you've grown up in a culture where religion is prevalent, even if you're not particularly religious yourself, what does that say to you if you're that Democrat voter? Now, there are lots of statistics and polls and those sort of things, like the poll that we mentioned as far as millennials, that show the nones, the people who check the box of none when it comes to religious affiliation, are fast growing.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of this could just be political opportunism,
right? It's
just saying this is
in
a
a sense as
fast-growing
one
group
of
of
your
people,
constituencies,
and so we're gonna appeal to that group of people. But you always have to take into account, well, what does that say to the folks who are religiously affiliated, and do they feel welcome in your party? I would, I'm not going to speak for religiously affiliated Democrats all over America, but if it was me, I would think twice about whether, am I still welcome in this party? I mean, I think I've raised the point on the show multiple times whether or not John F. Kennedy could get elected as a Democrat today. That's a devout Catholic president, leader of their party. And you look at his faith, the positions he took on issues, on taxes, on other things, he'd be hard pressed to get elected as a Democrat today. And I think this is maybe just more evidence of where their party is from an ideological standpoint.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the wording of the resolution to me would be offensive if I were a religious Democrat, because they're saying religiously, this is a quote from the resolution, religiously unaffiliated Americans overwhelmingly share the Democratic Party's values. They should advocate for, quote, rational public policy based on science and universal humanistic values. So to me, that says, okay, then
universal
if you're religious,
humanistic values.
Yeah, but if you're religious, you don't believe in science?
Right.
I think the Bible affirms science for the most part.
Well, and this is the contradiction that we've talked about many times on here. You claim to be the party of science. Well, where is that when you start talking about the issue of abortion?
Right.
You're going to ignore the science when it comes to a viable human being with a heartbeat, or the Born Alive Protection Act that we've talked about before. Where's the science on that? There are plenty of people of faith who work in scientific fields who are well regarded. Those two are not incongruous. If anything, they're compatible. And this it's going to be interesting to see what the reaction to this is. I think it's probably not a coincidence this happened right up against Labor Day weekend, when not many people are paying too much attention to the news. They're maybe more planning their barbecue or their pool party or whatever.
Well, we got to talk it up then.
But it's certainly an indication or another indication of where that party is and is going.
Well,
on the
guess
ideological
who
spectrum.
affirmed it? One of your great friends, Anne Lori Gaylor from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. She said it's a political landmark. But guess what? Robert Jeffress says that the Democrats are now going after the godless and the faithless. I think it's interesting.
Well, it is. And, it's another, and we can talk about this more, I guess, after the break, because I know we're coming up on it. But these two groups of people do not have to be mutually exclusive. There are areas of agreement between people who are of devout faith and people of no faith. And, that's one of the things that First Liberty defends all the time.
Well, give us a call, 800-351-1212, if you've got an opinion on this. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Executives at Google may claim that they are not biased against conservatives, but information from engineers who work for Google tell a different story. One of those engineers is Greg Coppola. He went public last month in an interview with Project Veritas, and after that interview, he was put on administrative leave. He explains that the algorithms used by Google don't write themselves. Software programmers write them to do what they want them to do. That makes sense to me. I wrote computer programs years ago and don't claim to have the expertise of those writing programs at Google, but it does seem like even machine language and machine learning can be easily manipulated to give biased results. Another Google engineer that has come forward is Zachary Voorhees. He also leaked documents from Google to Project Veritas. One of those documents provided evidence of what he called algorithmic unfairness. Once Google figured out that he was the person who leaked the documents, they took two actions. First, they demanded the material be returned. Then they sent law enforcement officials to his home to perform a wellness check. This was a blatant attempt at intimidating him. The one document he leaked that got my attention was the news blacklist used by Google. Lots of organizations and websites that we use to get information and educate our listeners was on the list. Christian Post, Daily Caller, Life News, American Thinker are just a few of a long list of sites on the Google blacklist. Another leaked document from Google ranked news sources in order of their credibility. ABC, CBS, PBS, CNN, and MSNBC were all ranked higher than Fox News. The investigative report by Project Veritas and the publication of these Google documents from insiders illustrate that there is indeed a bias in the way that this company aggregates and displays data. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Affirm Films and the Kendrick Brothers, Overcomer, starring Alex Kendrick and Priscilla Shire, rated PG, now playing in theaters. Overcomermovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
We're taking your calls at 800-351-1212. This little announcement by the Democrats in their resolution for their Democrat National Committee summer meeting that they're going to go after and praise non-religious voters, the religiously unaffiliated, and going after them, really. The largest religious group within the Democrat Party is the religiously unaffiliated. That's what the resolution says. Oh, we'd love to hear your reaction on this. Lathan, I also want to mention, because we've had many discussions here as we preview the elections about the Electoral College. Every time one party loses the electoral vote and wins the popular vote, that party usually gets upset about the Electoral College, wants to abolish it and all of that. And one of the leaders in this movement right now is Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. She's been writing, speaking, tweeting about it. And on Instagram last week, she said it's a scam that effectively weighs white voters over voters of color. And then she also said that it's nothing more than affirmative action for rural voters. It is helpful for rural voters because if there were no electoral college, if we relied strictly on a popular vote, we'd be elected. Our presidents would be elected by New York, L.A., Chicago, the big cities around the country, and the rural vote would have no voice. So what it is a balancer for rural voters, but it's also not affirmative action. It's actually helpful for blacks and always has been.
Yeah, I mean, here's a example number whatever it is, of Alexandria spouting off about something that she clearly knows nothing about. And whether it's not, she obviously doesn't know about affirmative, she doesn't understand what affirmative action is. She clearly doesn't understand what the Electoral College is. And you mentioned if it was a national popular vote, no candidate would ever show up in Iowa or Kansas or the Dakotas or lots of states. You could win just by going to, as you said, a few big cities around the country, and they would decide the president for all of us. And that is anathema to the principles this country was founded on. The Electoral College is, amongst other things, a brilliant idea that has worked and continues to work. I look at it this way. If it was a national popular vote and all people had to do is go to New York or L.A., Chicago, maybe a major city in the Midwest, you have the likelihood of the same group of geniuses who gave us Alexandria in Congress deciding who the president is now. And so this is just, yet another example of her running her mouth about something that she clearly has no idea what she's talking about. And, this is another, we're talking about the election. This is another thing that, especially the House candidates, are going to have to deal with. She is the face of that party when it comes to the House of Representatives. It's not Nancy Pelosi. It is Alexandria. And every Democrat running for re-election in a close district, every time Alexandria opens her mouth, she makes it harder for you to get reelected. Because if I was advising the Republicans running in those, you don't even have to say your opponent's name. But every time you do, you link your opponent's name with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and whatever the latest ridiculous thing she's had to say, and you put your opponent on record. Well, do you agree with her on this? And she is going to be the de facto face of that party in the midterm elections. So every time she says something as dumb as this, it hurts her party's chances of maintaining control of the House.
We're taking your calls, 800-351-1212, asking for comments on the Democrats' new resolution that they're going to go after the religiously unaffiliated. Shannon is in the state of Georgia to discuss this. Hi, Shannon. Thanks for calling. Hello, Shannon. Are you there?
Yes, hello?
Hi. What's your comment on this new resolution by the Democrats? They're going after the religiously unaffiliated.
Well, I honestly think people just don't want to be held accountable no more. And that's basically the gist of it all. Because you have this generation that does not care about family, and if they do care anything about family, they want to have a family their way. That's why you have women with women and men with men. They want to do everything the way they want to do it. With God, there comes standards. With God, He does things in decency and order. And with God and His word, it says, train up a child. And just like I was saying before, that God, when He says to His people that I need you to multiply, He was basically telling the people that because I need people that I need to house and to be able to carry out my work. But people don't want to have babies no more. And they're trying to put a stop on the way that God wants a family to be. He said, I want a man to lead the home, a woman to submit and to follow, have children, raise them up in the word and my word so that way that my gospel can keep carrying out. That's the way that God intended things to be. But people don't want to be held accountable no more. They want to do what they want to do. And because God comes with standards and accountability, they want to move away from that.
Well, there's so many ways in which this not only sort of dovetails with the article that we just, or the topic and the resolution that the Democrats put out, but also our next topic, which was a study talking about how millennials now don't find patriotism, religion, or having babies as important as they did 20 years ago. And I think, Shannon, thank you so much for calling in, because I do think that these are important discussions and they kind of go together. And what's happening to the Democrat Party and the fact that all these people with these big government programs think that they're going to do well there partly comports with the idea that there are just a lot of people out there now who don't see family, marriage, and all of that as important. And they're people are just living as individuals, and some of them aren't making it well, and they need a lot of big government to help them make it. And so that's why they advocate for it. And so a country that places less emphasis on family and on having kids and moms and dads being in the home is a country that needs more big government. What do you think? I'm asking you.
Okay,
Actually,
I thought our caller was still on. I'm not sure.
Our caller is she's listening, but she's right now. I wanted to kind of encourage some other folks to answer that, and so 800-351-1212. But you start us out, Nathan.
Sure. No, it's okay. What I want to get back to really is what I started to say right before the break, and that is I think if there's a mistake here by the party doing this is that they're looking at this as an either-or proposition, that we either go after the non-religious voters or we continue trying to get religious voters. And it doesn't have to be an either-or proposition for either party. There are things that those of us who are religious and those who aren't can agree on. They've obviously made a calculation that the work they've tried to do, selling their ideas to people of faith, has not paid off, and that it is better off to just say, okay, we're done with those folks. We're going after these.
That's what it sounds like.
We're going after these people. They're a fast-growing demographic anyway. But to be a successful, you don't build a majority party by identifying all the people you're not going to work with. If you want to become a majority party in this country, you need to be able to talk about your policy ideas and the things that you believe in a way that resonates with people across a very broad spectrum. And this is not just a criticism of the Democratic Party. Republicans are guilty of doing this sort of thing too, of looking at things as an either or instead of a potential both and. And I think it's a mistake, but we'll see. Maybe they have calculated that the very faithful are not going to be their voters anyway, and they don't have anything to lose by alienating them. I don't know. But this idea that as the thing that concerns me about this and about the poll we've mentioned is that when people place a low value on religion, they also tend to place a low value on religious freedom and religious liberty, and that's the work that we do. And I will say, though, typically over time, these types of things can become more important to a person as they age. That the millennials and the Gen Z that they polled right now, it might not be that big a deal to them right now, but talk to them again in 10 or 15 years and see if it is. It may not.
But what's interesting in the comparison that the poll makes, and we'll have to do this after the break, is that 20 years ago, that age group
correct yes
placed more value
placed
on
a higher
patriotism,
value on
religion, and having babies. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we will discuss that poll. I'll explain it again so you can weigh in on that, too. We are so grateful for your calls. We'll take them after the break. Stay with us.
From Affirm Films, Provident Films, and the Kindred Brothers comes Overcomer. John Harrison is a frustrated coach questioning his value until he crosses paths with a student struggling on her own journey.
What have you allowed to define you? When you find your identity in the one who created you, it'll change your whole perspective.
Overcomer, starring Alex Kendrick and Priscilla Shirer. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. Now play. More information is available at overcomermovie.com.
It's been said that a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. That was definitely true in the 19th century when preacher Charles Spurgeon said it. But here in the 21st century, truth can be just as fast. Think about it. When Point of View presents the truth, it reaches people across America and around the world instantly. You make that instant truth a reality when you join the Point of View Radio Truth Team. Get all the details now at pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
I'm Lathan Watts, and we are taking your calls, 800-351-1212. Let's go to Misty in California, listening in on KYCC. Hi, Misty.
Hi, Penna. I just wanted to say I think the kids today are not patriotic because they are not taught history in context. And so they only get little snippets, so they don't understand how exceptional this country is. I think they're not having children or thinking that's important because they don't know any better. And as far as the Democrats having...
What do you mean they don't know any better? They don't know any better that having children is good for the culture? Or?
They haven't lived long enough to recognize the value of children.
Okay.
And as far as the Democrats having this devoted love affair to science, that's laughable. I mean, they can't even recognize gender by science. So, yeah, I just think the whole thing is silly. And I agree with Shannon, who called earlier, that people don't want to be responsible to God, but that's nothing new, and we know that God wins.
Yeah. You know, on the religion, I mean, we do see young people walking away from their faith. I mean, there are a lot of studies that show that. Or they walk away from their church. They may not disavow God, but they walk away. And sometimes they do come back as they get older. When you said about children and religion, I think it's kind of the same thing. They don't know. They don't know yet. Someday, both those things kind of come back sometimes. When you have children, then you start to see the importance of faith. And sometimes if you're in a good faith tradition that's teaching well, you see the importance of procreation, of families raising children. But I think part of it, too, is that financially young people can't afford the things that others used to in 20 years ago. They can't afford a home. They can't afford maybe to get married, especially since you think you have to have this big splashy wedding today. And so they just do everything later. So they're not millennial. They're practically not in the millennial category anymore by the time they do get ready to have children.
Yeah, I have a lot of faith in this younger generation, and I believe that they are going to do amazing things. I mean, we've seen this over and over. If you read the scriptures, you know that the Israelites turned away and their children turned away, and there was grave consequences for that, and we're seeing the consequence today of our turning away. But God's always waiting for us to turn back, and he promises that the gates of hell won't prevail against his church.
I am hopeful that you are correct, and that resonates with my heart. Lathan, I think she's on to something in one sense, because God, he doesn't give up on his people.
Certainly not, and I'm very thankful. For that, because I'm sure that I've tried his patience at times, but you're exactly right. He doesn't, but it does require of us that turning back towards him at some point. But
but he knows how to bring us. He knows how to bring us to the point of turning back, and there will always be a remnant. And in the meantime, we need to keep remembering that the politicians nor us are in charge of the future. He is.
Absolutely.
Amen. Thank you so much for those wise words and your call.
Thanks, Lori.
That was Misty. She was saying goodbye, and I accidentally pushed the button a little bit too soon. But that was a good call, and I think wise words. One of the, I think, things for how do we deal with this, because when you see a poll like this, it's a bit disturbing. You have to kind of think ahead, especially believers, I think, on how you deal with it. Do you just accept it? Do you go and take action And I think, some people say, okay, the family didn't do its job. The family needs to get better at discipling kids, which is one of the points that was made by Chelsea on the Millennial Roundtable last week. I thought it was really good. She talked about discipleship and teaching scripture, and you do that in the home and in the family. And Nick also said that. But I also think that we as people of faith, and maybe someone in my generation who, my kids are growing up now, I have grandkids and I can disciple them, but also just the culture as a whole. I don't think we ever need to stop speaking to the culture and being a godly Christian influence on the culture as much as we can. And it's the role of the culture in these bad trends is huge. I mean, academia, Hollywood.
Certainly. I said earlier in the first hour when we were talking about this that I'm not surprised by this poll when you consider how news media, other types of media have for at least since the last election tried to redefine what patriotism is. They've equated patriotism with nationalism and nationalism with white nationalism, and therefore patriotism with racism. So if you've been hearing that constant drumbeat of that idea for the last 4 years, and then a pollster asks you, do you rate patriotism high on your list of priorities? Of course they didn't. If that's what your idea of patriotism is, no, you're not going to tell a pollster that it's important to you. And the same thing with religion. If you've grown up seeing nothing but negative stories about people of faith, whether it's the abuse by people of faith of children, or the cover-up of that abuse, or the latest pastor to leave the faith, or whatever it is, I think words matter, especially in a poll. And I think if the word used had been something other than religion, if it had been faith,
that's definitely got a negative connotation for some
or
people.
Spirituality, which has a little bit more of an individual feel to it, I think the response might have been different. But there are, there just like with any institution, there are issues with organized religions, and if that's what you've been inundated with via news media, movies, TV, whatever it is, and you have not had, as you mentioned, like your parents or somebody in your life telling you the other side of things, it would make sense that if you're asked about religion, that it wouldn't rank very high with you. And when it comes to having children, millennials and Gen Z have been told every year that there's only 10 years left and the world's coming to an end because of climate change. Well, if you think the world's coming to an end in 10 years, would you want to bring a kid into that world? No. I mean, it doesn't surprise me. But excuse me, I think you're right in that it is if all you do with these poll results is just wring your hands and go, oh, these kids today, well, then that's been going on ever since there have been kids. Everybody does it. Every generation worries about the generation coming behind them.
And usually the generation, as they mature, their values shift back toward country, religion, marriage, and all of that.
That's true. But, if that's your only reaction, you have to look at yourself, too. Like, I've got teenage daughters. What am I doing to talk to them about these types of things and important things, so that they are armed with some information to at least get an idea of some perspective on all the other stuff that they're flooded with 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that and you just leave the culture to raise your kids for you, this is what will happen.
Yeah, but I think beyond that too, to the extent that we can, try to change the culture.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, I've got
it
this
doesn't
book.
absolve us of that responsibility. I guess my point is it's easy to read a poll like this and be overwhelmed, like, oh, this is this entire generation of people that think this way. Well, you don't have to change an entire generation of people. or help an entire generation of people. You help the person that you know that's of that generation. That's either your kid, your nephew, your grandkid, whoever it may be, or people that you're in contact with at work, school, whatever it is. You influence your sphere of influence. You don't have to fix the whole generation. You just help the people that you know. You do that in your corner of the world, and I do it in my corner of the world. And pretty soon, you start to see a bigger impact.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are taking your calls, 800-351-1212. We'll take a few more in our final segment of Point of View. Also give you an update on what's happened this week at the American Legion Convention. Mike Pence was there, and he said the Bible stays. We'll talk about it after this. The idea that the United States might purchase Greenland has been called comical, imperialistic, even unthinkable since President Trump floated it a couple of weeks ago. Greenland is part of Denmark, and the Danish Prime Minister found the idea absurd. Washington Post columnist Mark Thiessen points out some of the advantages this purchase could bring. We don't need a military base in Greenland. We already have one. Thule Air Force Base, the U.S. Air Force's northernmost facility. But a really good reason to buy Greenland would be for its rich stores of minerals, resources Denmark has not been able or willing to exploit, including zinc, lead, gold, diamonds, copper, and uranium. Greenland is also attractive because of its rare earth elements, which, Mr. Thiessen writes, are critical to the production of everything from electric cars to smartphones and lasers. Currently, China supplies us with many of these elements, but we could easily be cut off due to our trade dispute. The Chinese are trying to corner the market for Greenland's rare earth minerals. Buying Greenland would put us in control of these strategically important minerals. Greenland's primary value to the United States, though, would be to provide a sea route in the Arctic. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo recently stated, quote, "Steady reductions in sea ice are opening new passageways and new opportunities for trade." He says this could potentially slash the time it takes to travel between Asia and the West by as much as 20 days. Secretary Pompeo pointed out that these emerging sea lanes in the Arctic could become the 21st century Suez and Panama canals. Buying Greenland would also be advantageous militarily, serving to elbow out China and Russia, both of whom have aggressively targeted the Arctic with bases, scientific research stations, and strategic investments. And Greenlanders would benefit economically. The U.S. can afford to do much more than Denmark can to develop the island. Buying Greenland is actually a great idea. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back. It's gone fast. The final segment is here, and we've got to pack a lot in. So first I want to pack in this call. David is in Arizona, or Doug, I'm sorry, is in Arizona, and I think he's got a good comment. Doug, thank you for calling in.
Oh, it's me.
It's you. I said
Hello.
David, but I meant Doug.
Yeah. First time you see me with David. Yeah, I just have a comment about the lady was talking about the young kids, the way that they think and the way that they believe, and the brainwashing they get from the colleges and stuff. But I think that it boils down a lot to the fact that the young kids today, they have no investment in the country. I'm a veteran. every veteran that I know of has an investment in this country, and we want what's best for the country. No matter what our political views are, everybody has a right to that. But it just seems to me that they just don't. They're stuck with mama's apron strings and daddy's money, and they go to these colleges and they hear all this baloney. They become anti-Semitic. They become, they embrace socialism. They embrace this global warming, which the man that I listened to the other day on your show, he completely destroyed the entire theory of global warming.
Right.
And the thing of it is, these kids, they need to hear another side. I mean, I truly thank God I'm not in college today, because I would flunk every course, because I would be, contradicting what these professors say about all these different stuff,
Yes, and the ones that are in college are often not serving in the military. They're in college, so they're learning that, and they're not serving. Exactly. And I did wonder how many kids from military families were surveyed, because there is a whole patriotic sector of the culture.
Yes, absolutely. It is. But anyways, that's all I wanted to say. And I appreciate your show. It's great. I listen to it every chance I get.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you much.
I just want to make one mention to sort of wrap up this discussion of the survey, Lathan, and that is, I pulled out a book because it reminded me of A Nation at Risk, which was a study done in 1983, back when I was just starting to raise my kids. And there was a commission convened by then President Reagan. His education secretary, Terrell Bell, commissioned this survey, and this was one of the conclusions. If an unfriendly foreign power had attempted to impose on America the mediocre educational performance that exists today, we might have viewed it all as an act of war. And there was lots of stats. And then, after that, there was waves and waves of educational reform. But I do think that some of that educational reform neglected patriotism and moral values, and it denigrated religion. And so a lot of the educational reform that happened in the aftermath of that actually put our children at risk. And then there was a book that came out that was sort of a reaction to A Nation at Risk, and it was written by Dr. James Dobson and Gary Bauer, Children at Risk, a battle for the hearts and minds of our kids. And it gave all sorts of prescriptions on what we could do in the country. It was more of a policy book than a family book. Even though Jim Dobson was a family guy, he also became a policy guy. And I think it's both and. Yes, some of these things we did do that they prescribed but this is a divided nation, so we can't do all the things we need to do in order to catechize or teach our children the things they need to know. So I think we're in a battle, and that's really the bottom line.
Certainly, and like you said, it's not an either or; it's a both and. You have to engage in the fight for the culture, and you have to educate your kids.
Mm-hmm.
You have to take that responsibility for yourself, and not bank on the fact that they're going to be taught everything they should be taught in school when it comes to history or the Constitution, the Founding Fathers. People can disagree over politics, but we both, people on both sides of a political issue, still ought to be able to love a country that protects their right to do so. And that's, for me, that's really what I think of when I think of patriotism. I joked before, I love Mark Twain's definition of patriotism, and that is support your country all the time, your government when it deserves it. And that's a pretty good that's a pretty good way.
But help your country to deserve it.
Yeah,
try to do what you can to make your country deserve it. We posted an article. Lathan put this before my attention by Michael Knowles, Michael Knowles, the talk show host. But he wrote, "Americans are living off the fumes of religion," and that could be part. That's his take on why this poll is as it is. It's very interesting. I would recommend you read it at pointofview.net. And also, I've put a couple pieces up there about the American Legion Convention. One about the things that Vice President Pence said when he went there, because he was basically saying that the things that First Liberty has done to help the VA figure out that they need to allow religious artifacts, including Bibles, at their events and on their POW and MIA tables. And he said the Bible stays, and that was so powerful. And then also another speaker there was, of course, the VA Secretary, Robert Wilkie, and he was so supportive of Christian values in the VA that I thought that was very encouraging too. And those pieces are at pointofview.net.
Yeah, it was great to hear from both of them. The situation they're referring to was a case that we're involved in New Hampshire that involves a POW MIA display and a family Bible that was donated by a prisoner of war in a German POW camp during World War II. That man donated his family Bible to be on this display table, and some folks didn't like that, complained about it, threatened to sue, eventually did find somebody to file a lawsuit. First Liberties intervened in that to defend our client, the Northeast POW MIA network, who put up the display. And so to hear Vice President Pence say, our message is very clear, the Bible stays, was very encouraging. And the VA Secretary has already been really strong on this issue leading up to this. It was great to hear him reiterate that as well. So firstliberty.org, if you want to stay tuned on that issue, learn more about that case and others, you can check us out there.
I think we mentioned this early in the show, but the fact that this Bladensburg Memorial, the American Legion was the case on behalf of them versus the American Humanist Society. And that case was such a great Supreme Court decision. And, this was a good celebration of that at the American Legion Convention, but also things are happening now because of that decision. And it's just, we're getting reports of them continuing to come in, and it's going to continue.
It is, if you had to boil down to its essence, what the Supreme Court's majority opinion in that case said was that monuments, memorials, and practices, which is a very big word.
Yes.
That covers a lot of things. Monuments, memorials, symbols, practices that are in keeping with the history and tradition of this country are now presumed constitutional. And that's a huge turning point. That puts us, before we were always on defense. Somebody would say, that's unconstitutional. We had to prove why it wasn't. Well, this completely flips that script. This says they are presumed constitutional, and so now folks like Freedom from Religion Foundation have to come in or the American Humanist Association and prove that it isn't. We're already seeing results, monuments that were being threatened that aren't anymore. I believe the POW MIA display is a tradition of this country that is well in keeping with the history and tradition of this country and now presumed constitutional. So it's a great win.
Yes,
we're going to see more. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. If you called in, I'm sorry we couldn't take all the calls. Appreciate you trying. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the Republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.